So as a mega Batman fan, I really thoroughly enjoyed Batman the Caped Crusaders from the brilliant mind of Bruce Timm, who brought us the absolutely iconic and quintessential Batman the Animated Series, which still holds up today because it's just so enjoyable. Is just such a brilliant examination into the Gotham City world, and all of the heroes and all of the villains are so brilliantly depicted. And of course, it introduced Harley Quinn, who is now an absolutely incredible Batman villainous character. I feel like a lot of people are focusing on Batman the Animated Series as being the pinnacle of Batman, which it definitely is, but I feel like the Batman, the animated cartoon series that came after Batman the Animated Series, is also a bit of a reinterpretation of these iconic characters, and is just so underrated. I mean, Batman the Caped Crusader is a bit of a neo-noir 1940s take on this world, whereas the Batman is actually more of a modern take, and also very similarly to Caped Crusader, is also a reinterpretation and a re-look at all of these wicked characters. I think it's interesting how originally Warner Brothers pitched Bruce Timm a continuation of Batman the Animated Series, which they did actually do with the new Batman Animated Adventures, which also then spun Batman into partnering up with Superman, and then ultimately the Justice League, and then Justice League Unlimited. So they did definitely continue it. But actually, Bruce Timm was already thinking of a more edgier, darker take from an animated, serialized perspective, as of course he has also worked on a number of different movies and video games. And at the same time, J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves were also interested in doing a bit of a Batman animated series. And thankfully, when Bruce Timm presented and pitched to them what he was thinking, they were really on board. And so all three of them are now executive producers on this series. And like I said, they reinterpreted everything. For example, trying to give Two-Face a bit of a different identity. Of course, flipping Harley Quinn so that actually in her human form, Harleen Quinzel is the more fun, zany character. And when she becomes Harley Quinn, she becomes really serious and really twisted. So certain reinterpretations do work really, really well, but others unfortunately don't. Hamish Linklater has done such a good job in reintroducing everyone from a Batman animated series perspective, as he does such a good job voicing both Bruce Wayne and Batman. If anything, I would have loved even more Bruce Wayne in this series, as I feel like a number of different interpretations don't explore the fun, cool, playboy billionaire aspects of Bruce Wayne. I mean, it definitely was there, but I feel like they definitely could have delved into it so much more. And very similarly to the Batman, this is Batman in his early years, so he's both being introduced to the new villainous characters as well as dealing with the mob side of Gotham City. And he's also finding himself within the Batman persona. I feel like his look, even though it is a bit of a darker neo-noir take on Batman, he did actually look a little bit similar to how they reinterpreted him in The Batman, and very similarly to Robert Pattinson's The Batman movie, which was funnily enough also called The Batman. I feel like he is also bringing out the detective aspects of this character, and I'm sure that Matt Reeves had something to do with that, as I just loved how every single episode really does bring that aspect out of this character. And I feel like for a number of different reasons, Batman is such an awesome character. One of them being that he is such a cool detective, and I'm so glad that they really did delve into that. Of course, everybody loves Alfred Pennyworth, but I do feel like Batman is a little bit of a jerk towards him. And in the Gentleman Ghost episode, we found out that actually Alfred is hiding and harboring a little bit of a secret against Bruce Wayne that Bruce doesn't know yet. I'm so glad that actually they did delve into the supernatural aspects and that they weren't afraid to do that, as Batman is a character that just delves into so many different cool things. For example, the dark Gotham City, of course his past in terms of being trained as a martial arts guy, and then of course entering into the supernatural world, for example with the Lazarus Pit, the Ra's al Ghul family, over here with the Gentleman Ghost, and also with Nocturna. Speaking of Nocturna, Bruce Timm actually wanted her to be a big part of Batman the Animated Series, but Warner Brothers didn't want to hear it, as they didn't want to have vampires and vampiric things taking place in that series, as they felt like it was too adult for a younger audience. But of course this series is being pitched to a slightly older audience, so they were definitely able to bring it out over here. And on the episode, I thought it was really funny how they introduced 4 characters that then do go on to become Robin. And I think it's interesting, speaking of the audience, that Batman the Animated Series speaks to both audiences in terms of older people also being able to really identify with this series, whilst also younger kids were able to enjoy it. And I loved the 90s, as they were really able to make adult content, whereas nowadays I feel like animations that are catering towards a younger audience just really babify everything, so that actually the older audience cannot enjoy it at all. Whereas I feel like with Caped Crusader, actually, they had the older audience in mind, as very similarly to X-Men 97, they knew that the 90s audience have obviously now grown up. So they, of course, wanted to create something really sophisticated for that audience. But at the same time, very similarly to their 90s counterparts, they were also creating something that is able to be enjoyed by kids as well. I've always loved Harvey Dent. I think he's always such a cool character, a more edgier version usually of Bruce Wayne that isn't afraid to really push the mark. And I loved it, how he was a true supporting character across this series. On that point, I loved how every single episode was introducing a new different villain, and of course had a different detective case that was being solved, but at the same time it had serialized storytelling, so you were being introduced to certain characters over a number of different episodes, Harvey Dent being one of the main ones, and I loved it as we really were with this character. And if you watch The Lincoln Lawyer, then I feel like Harvey Dent is so similar to The Lincoln Lawyer in terms of being a district attorney that is always defending really nefarious, darker type of characters, but he is always so driven with being a man of justice. Of course, sometimes he does bend the rules, but the one time that he decided to not bend the rules and actually stick to everything is the time where tragedy strikes, and of course then he does transform into Two-Face. And I think it's really interesting as Two-Face, as maybe the Harvey Dent persona was keeping his darker attributes at bay, but then when he kind of felt like he has got nothing to lose, then all of those evil inhibitions are coming and rising to the surface, and sometimes you can see the conflict that is happening within his mind. So I just think it's such a tragedy that they killed off this character, as he was so wicked, like I said, so brilliantly written, so complex, and so layered. I am just really hopeful that somehow they bring him back, maybe through the Lazarus Pit or something like that. And speaking of serialized storytelling, I loved how they were showing how corrupt the police force is, mainly through Bullock and Flask, as these two characters are not afraid to betray their colleagues and accept bribes and just kind of be on the side of the evil people all the time. And I loved how Harvey Dent was even able to wind these guys up in terms of making Bullock think that Flask is always the one that is in control and that he is a fall guy wrapped up with a puppet as well. So I thought that line was so clever, and actually Harvey Dent was able to get out of the car because of this. You have to laugh at the fact that they gender bent Penguin into becoming Oswaldo, who was a burlesque dancer. But actually, she was a really twisted character, as she was able to be happily killing off one of her sons and actually successfully destroys Gotham PD, which actually made Batman say, look, this time I actually lost. And I thought that was just such a great way to kick off the series. And the second episode just continued it on that high, as Clayface was such a cool villain, and I loved all of the detective murder mystery things that were taking place with this character. And I feel like Clayface, either he's a bit of a joke like he is in the Harley Quinn series, or he is becoming such a big, horrific character that he just loses all of his humanity. Whereas this time, I feel like they kept both of the horror aspects as well as the human aspects of this character, and actually he became a really twisted guy. And I feel like there's really good social commentary in terms of people being really obsessed with plastic surgery, and shape-shifting is such a cool ability, especially from a storytelling perspective. And I just can't wait already to see Clayface again, as like I said, he is such a layered character, and I can't wait to see what storylines they're going to come up with next. I thought Christina Ricci did such a good job in terms of voicing Catwoman, really bringing her to life in such a cool way. And I feel like it was really clever how they were able to make Catwoman a little bit similar to Batman, even though she's not a proper orphan. Her dad is obviously in jail. And they were showing that Selina Kyle has got similarities to Bruce Wayne in terms of also coming from a rich family, but actually this time her parents didn't leave her anything. But very similarly to Bruce Wayne having his own butler, Selina Kyle also had her own maid, but her maid really did double cross her right at the end in terms of selling all of the final possessions that Selina Kyle had to be able to have enough money to then run away. If anything, I feel like they could have given Catwoman another episode, or at least built her up a little bit more before giving her a fully dedicated episode. But what I did love is that she had her own Catwoman car, and also she was able to control and tame a panther, who was then able to fight Batman. And speaking of brilliant voice portrayals, I feel like McKenna Grace also did such a good job in terms of bringing Nocturna to life. I feel like Onomatopoeia might as well not have been there. I feel like this character was so much better represented in Superman and Lois, as in over there. That character's powers were so much better, and the storyline was so much better as well. Whereas over here, like I said, might as well not have been there. But what was good in that episode is that one of the other detectives is also a little bit crooked, as they are nearly going to kill Barbara Gordon just for the bounty on her head. And speaking of Barbara Gordon, of course, she hasn't transformed into Batgirl yet, but they have definitely teased it, which is of course going to happen in the next season. And I think Jim Gordon was really, really cool. As you can see at first, he is trying to be the noble good guy within the police force, but he's got so many people, even his superiors, the people that he is looking after, that are already turning to the dark side. So you just know that soon Jim Gordon is going to have a real friendship with Batman. I thought of Renee Montana was a really cool detective, and I loved her relationship with Harleen Quinzel. And speaking of Harleen Quinzel, like I said right in the beginning, I think it's interesting that they made Harleen the really funny, zany version of the character, and then Harley Quinn is the darker, more eviler version. And I thought it's interesting how she tries to help people from a psychiatric perspective in the beginning, but when she sees that she can't really get through to them, then she kind of traps them and kind of destroys their mind in terms of brainwashing them and controlling them and making them give all of their money to charity. And the charities that she picks is the ones that they are being nefarious towards. So I feel like all of those aspects were really clever. But unfortunately, I just feel like as a character, this character should have been and could have been so much better, especially as there have been countless different interpretations of Harleen Quinzel. And I just feel like this one, unfortunately, was just really, really boring, which is definitely not a word that you attribute with Harley Quinn. And I understand what they were trying to do. They were trying to make something completely different to everything else, but I feel like they just went too much down that path that unfortunately the end result just was not that impressive. And I loved how this series ends with a cameo from Joker, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with the Joker next season, as the Joker toxin that he is infecting a lot of people with makes them just laugh uncontrollably. So I feel like this guy is just going to be a twisted villain, and I just cannot wait to see what this interpretation of the Joker is going to be like. So I just feel like Batman Caped Crusader just did everything right, even though certain interpretations of certain characters weren't the best. And I typically don't like period pieces, but I just loved what they did here. I feel like the neo-noir detective world was realized so well, very similar to Ripley, which very recently came out. They kind of reinterpreted the talented Mr. Ripley in a bit of a neo-noir series, and I feel like Batman Caped Crusader did that also in a really cool way. And I feel like it was the right decision to release all 10 episodes in one go, as it was just so addictive, so bingeable, and I already cannot wait to see what they're going to be doing with season 2, and to see how they're going to continue to reinterpret certain things and certain characters. I hope that they learn and listen to what fans have been saying about the first season, and then input that into the second season, and hopefully into future seasons to come. But as far as this season is concerned, I really, really enjoyed it, and so I'm going to give it a solid 7 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Batman Caped Crusader? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.